Thank you. I love telling stories, and this is fabulous. Very unlike many of the speaking engagements that many of us go to and sit through, and so I really appreciate this opportunity. By way of introduction, I am the founder and creative director of a company called Dancing Inc. Productions. We work toward a new global culture and economy in what I call the imagination age, and we have been since 2006. And we work on a lot of different projects. We create spaces and we create strategy for digital culture for real world benefit. So virtual worlds is just one part of what we do. But the story I'm going to tell you today is about a project that I worked on with my collaborator, Joshua Fouts, who's here with us today as well. We were senior fellows at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs when we did this project. It's called Understanding Islam Through Virtual Worlds. And the project took place in 4 continents in the physical world and also in the virtual world of Second Life, which is what you see here. That's my avatar, Eureka Deja Vu. She is 7 feet tall, has higher cheekbones, but so this is a Johari window here, and the way that the window is divided is how I see myself accurately, how I see myself inaccurately, how others see me accurately, and how others see me inaccurately. And so because we're in cultural relations and there's this concept of respect, I believe that respect is also listening to the aspirational qualities of identity construction, and that's what virtual worlds let us do. Because people are born in the physical world into a socioeconomic, racial, gender, any kind of framework you could possibly shackle on a human being with cause and effect so entangled that we can barely parse it. In virtual worlds, people can express themselves in ways they simply can't in the physical world. So our demographic that we work in is people who are trying to understand how a new society and a new global culture can be created, which is not to take anything away from gaming. If you always want to be a vampire and now you get to bite virtual necks, you know, I support that. But So this project, we started our project in the physical world in Doha, Qatar at the US Islamic World Forum. And because we work in virtual worlds, even at something as formal as the US Islamic World Forum, people are kind of so surprised by it that you can really get something done that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. We had 2 young hip hop artists at the forum, Mohammed Mughrabi, who is Palestinian, and Yaz, who is the only Iranian who was permitted to leave Iran to perform. And I heard them both speaking through their translators in Arabic and Farsi about how they had not been invited to perform at the forum, but they had been invited just to attend. And so I asked them to perform at our event that we did at the forum, which actually meant they were performing in the physical world, but really they were just doing it so we can have a virtual performance. So everybody at the forum, you know, was dancing, and it was really interesting. And we created one avatar for them. So as they went back and forth in the physical world in Arabic and Farsi, they had one avatar in the virtual world, and later when we had the lyrics translated into English, they were both speaking about reconciliation, and even though neither of them had any sense what the other one was talking about. So this is, the Federation of American Scientists have built a rebuild of ancient Mesopotamia, which is present-day Iraq, which is really interesting. It's a global collaborative build. If you see a charred hearth, it's because they have a charred hearth that they have remnants of, and they've reconstructed this entire environment. So this was the cover of the project. I did a graphic novel to go along with it. We had thousands of pictures that we took in the virtual world, and a friend of ours, we went out to dinner with a couple of friends and handed me a stack of graphic novels, and I looked at Josh and I said, I have to write a graphic novel for the project. So part of the reason we chose this image was because the title of the book fit in the space, but also because, I'm not going to deny that, virtual worlds can be very cluttered and not very aesthetically pleasing. But it was interesting to us because a lot of women who dress in various traditional attire in the physical world, either full burqa, hijab, all different incarnations. In the virtual world, they choose sometimes to wear Western clothing because it's not a physical body that you're covering, so the rules are different. And a lot of women who dress in Western attire in the physical world choose to dress in traditional attire in the virtual world to test it out and see how it makes them feel. So this woman was from Qatar, actually. So we interviewed people from 25 different countries in Second Life. there were some amazing communities, mosque communities that had people who were not Muslim necessarily, or Muslim from all around the world, talking about very interesting subjects. For example, is it inappropriate or disrespectful to wear digital shoes in a virtual mosque? It's not a physical environment. So these are discussions that are very difficult to have in the physical world, because it's almost impossible to separate tradition from spirituality, from superstition, from stubbornness, from, I mean, you name it. Everyone's different. Everyone brings their own personalities to a conversation. In Second Life and other virtual worlds, it's very interesting as well, because I can speak to the entire group at once, but I can also have private chats with Saul. I mean, not while I'm in the middle of speaking, but you can have private chats with Saul, or private chats with Josh, or with John, whoever. So you can have levels of conversation happening simultaneously. Furthermore, it eliminates not only the threat of physical violence in any way, shape, or form, because there's no physical person there. You can always close a computer and walk away from it. But it also eliminates, people are shy, or people don't know how to speak up, and they don't know what they want to say. So it enables people to have very difficult cultural conversations in ways that are very productive. And every religion you can imagine, when I first went into Second Life in 2006, a friend of mine from IBM, I had just finished investigating post-Katrina corporate profiteering. Prior to 2006, my work was very physically based. Blighted cities, disaster management, nuclear industry. So I wasn't a gamer, I wasn't looking for this. A friend of mine mentioned to me, you should investigate something more fun. And I said, well, I agree, but unfortunately, you can't really get people to pay for that very often. And he said, well, why don't you check out Second Life? I said, what is Second Life? He said, it's an amazing place where you can have a beach house and new friends. I'm like, I'm there, I'm gonna go check it out. So I went home and registered my avatar, and I had happened to be reading The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell at the time. So, people say virtual worlds are filled with sex. I say, seek and ye shall find, of course. Anything that you have in the physical world, you will have in the virtual world as well. It is human beings behind the avatars. However, I looked for mosques, synagogues, temples, churches, not thinking I would find anything, to be honest with you, just because I just happened to be reading that book. But I found a wealth of events going on, conferences about the future of religion. And so my first night in Second Life, and what got me hooked, and I think if this hadn't happened, I probably may not have gone on from there. I went to a virtual synagogue while prayer services were going on, and I met a Muslim woman, and I started interviewing her, and she told me that her entire life she had been burning with curiosity to know what goes on in a synagogue during prayer services, and she felt that now she had the opportunity to find out. And I realized at that point that there was no going back from this, that although virtual worlds have a media narrative around them that is completely misguided, and lazy journalists who have never gone into virtual worlds, but they see that avatars can look like Pamela Anderson, and they get snagged on that. The fact of the matter is, virtual goods are a billion-dollar industry, and part of that is for education. You can buy spaceships and teach third graders how to go to Mars, how to go to the moon. It isn't just kitschy stuff that's meaningless. It's also very valuable educational things. So one of the things that, that's my avatar, one of the things that we experience is a virtual Hajj to Mecca. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that millions of people who are hungry and hot and praying and in a state of spiritual commitment is the same thing as going into Second Life and going on a virtual Hajj. But I didn't know anything about the Hajj to Mecca prior to this experience. And we had tour guides who were young Egyptian men who not only took us on the entire virtual Hajj to Mecca, but I interviewed them extensively over the course of weeks, possibly months, about the Muslim Brotherhood and their perceptions of the Muslim Brotherhood. And so a lot of the research we did went beyond the virtual world. But when we first went to the Hajj to Mecca, they give you everything you need to participate. And when something appears, it's called rezzing. So you rez a headscarf. My clothes didn't rez. So my avatar was not dressed like this at the time. And we met a man who was from the North Caucasus, which is a blood-soaked region, a lot of conflict. In fact, conflict just flared up there this week. who I asked him about ijtihad. And ijtihad is the critical thought component of Islam. It's the counterbalance to jihad. It's the fight you fight with yourself to keep your ideas current. Of course, we all know about jihad. Very few of us know about ijtihad. And he thought I asked about jihad, and in chat, in text, he said, this is why I don't talk to Westerners, because you always want to know about jihad right away. And I said, well, could you reread the chat log? Because I didn't ask about it. I asked about ijtihad. He reread the chat log and apologized to me for the misunderstanding. I apologized to him for underestimating the language barrier. And we had an incredible interview for almost an hour and a half. Try to imagine that in the physical world, me standing there, asking people about, I mean, it would not happen. It would not happen. This is from the graphic novel, but basically this is a woman who owns this property, and so she got into a fight with him. She can kick him off her property. So there are a lot of women's groups in Second Life and in virtual worlds, a lot of women who hide their laptops, when their families are home. When their families aren't home, they have a total life where they're actually creating things, selling things, and keep in mind a lot of virtual worlds have currency that is real. So if you create objects and you sell them, that's real money going into your bank account. So in 2008, conflict erupted between Hamas and Israel, and there was a protest in Second Life, a peaceful protest that was really, really interesting with people from all over the world. But this really interested me the most because I interviewed this man about what the symbolism, why did he set himself on fire? And he said his heart was so broken over the violence on both sides that he didn't know what else to do to express his anger. So virtual worlds create an environment in which you can express your anger and voice it, and other people can talk to you about it. And it's a creative, it's an artistic, creative expression of cultural relations in a way that you cannot do this in the physical world without causing a lot of problems for yourself and other people, to say the least. Arabic font, Arabic characters were not supported in Second Life at this time, and people actually created an alphabet using Roman, font for characters to communicate in Arabic, which I think is really interesting as well. And these are just people from all over the world, all different kinds of people, and they're there. This was a Future of Religions, Religions of the Future event that was fascinating because people in these environments are also not just concerned with, we all are in a position where religion has to be respected, but there's a lot of people who aren't religious whose entire social discourse gets hijacked by conversations about religion, as was recently the case with the maybe I'm going to burn the Quran, maybe I'm not, and the whole country is suddenly paying attention to this debate. So there are also debates that go on that are very vibrant about what is the future going to look like? How are we all going to coexist on a planet when science is also starting to influence our spiritual beliefs as well? And in addition to the Abrahamic faiths being very well expressed in virtual environments, there's all sorts of creative symbolism around faith and spirituality being explored in new ways. And I'll just leave you with the idea that this is a flicker getter that we had designed for our space by an artist named John Philwalk, who you search on something, and then images tagged with that thing from all over the world arise in the air around your avatar. And in virtual environments, you can bring anything from the internet or the physical world in, and yet you can still collaborate on creating these amazing environments that really express things in ways that it's very difficult for people to communicate with this level of creativity and collaborative creativity from all around the world at the same time. I think while virtual environments appear to be dehumanizing in some way because they are not real, they're not physical, we traveled around the world and we met many of the people that we interviewed, and the interactions that we had were so much more complex and candid and vulnerable because we had had these extensive dialogues prior to meeting. And so I think as people create something together, that can be the very thing that allows us to transcend these quagmires that we're in. Because as long as we're arguing about things that there's no solution in many cases, people tend to forget that when they're collaborating creatively on something. So when you see, for example, if I created this space in a virtual world and we all collaborated, someone would have to build the structure, someone else would have to put the texture on it, someone else would have to do the lighting. So suddenly everyone has something to do that's meaningful, and this is growing as a huge industry. So the two takeaways I would leave you with is, one, don't underestimate the virtual goods industry for education, social good, and creative transcendence. And two, ignore media narratives around things that your gut tells you are wrong, because the narrative around virtual worlds is so misleading and kitschy that it gives everyone like, oh, you can't hack First Life, so you have to try Second Life. Well, that's not the reality of the situation. So I would just say, trust your instincts and don't underestimate the digital culture for real world benefit.